All right. I think maybe Liz, you might be frozen already. But
Yeah, appears that way.
okay.
Am I
I think
frozen?
we're back now.
Um,
Okay, we're
I'm back.
recording.
Okay. Cool. All right. How's it going, everybody? Will Crane here from Bunker Labs. We are joined by Mike Anderson, who's the founder of Stache. Mike, how's it going?
I can't complain. I'm holed up by the beach in Santa Cruz riding this thing out. I hope everybody's safe out there.
Appreciate it. So, Mike, let's get a little bit of your backstory. Where are you from? What did you do in the military? What did you do leading up to starting Stache?
Yeah, so I grew up in the DC area. I served in the Air Force. I was a crew chief on 16s. After that was over, I went to a school called College of Charleston for 1 year, and then I transferred out to Stanford where I graduated. And I was dead set on becoming a doctor. And as luck would have it, I got admitted really early on in that process, and that gave me the flexibility to go take classes with the GSB students, the MBAs over at Stanford. Um, and the lessons learned in those classes, the case studies you see are either a distraction or incredibly inspirational, depending on how you look at it. And by virtue of the fact that I'm here today talking to you and not in med school or graduating med school right now, I think you can guess kind of how that led me down a very different path from what I had been focused on for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But it was during that class at the GSB, all case study based, that I started thinking about how I might come up with a way to offset med school debt. Dawned on me that most of the students at Stanford are from out of state, and there was abundant free space in faculty homes adjacent to campus, grad student housing, and we could monetize it. And this is 3 or 4 years ago now. And Airbnb was doing quite well, still ascending a little bit. I mean, they've made even more progress since then, but it seemed like you could apply that model elsewhere. And so I reached out to some friends who were in grad student housing, reached out to some professors. We put our first supply on the platform. I reached out to the study abroad office, and we had our first 20 customers kind of winter quarter. And so that was validation around what was going on. People were paying us. And then we got into an accelerator on campus. And through that, I ended up crossing paths with some of the folks, a prominent CEO out in the Bay Area who's founded 2 unicorn-sized companies, and turned out he was one of the first backers of Airbnb, quite literally first check-in. And so he pretty much challenged me to think about the broader problem here, which wasn't just this college play, but the storage sector at large. And so it's a $40 billion a year industry. There's more storage facilities than there are McDonald's and Starbucks combined in America, and we just don't think about it. But as you kind of reflect on your commutes around the country to work in various cities, you probably realize there's storage facilities everywhere. It seems like every other exit ramp on and off a freeway. So massive sleepy space.
So what specifically does Stache do? Where does Stache come in?
Yeah, so Stache is a peer-to-peer marketplace for storage. So you can think of self-storage, like what Public Storage does. You can think of boat storage, RV storage. We have some business use cases where we've got small business owners who maybe don't utilize the entire footprint of their retail business, coffee shop, if you will, or something along those lines. And they've got space and back, and they share that with other businesses adjacent to them around the corner for storing inventory. We've got some restaurants on there storing, bulk purchases of everything from alcohol to go boxes. And then in the private consumer vertical, we've got folks storing classic cars, boats, college students storing boxes, and even a Lamborghini that got damaged in the tornado that hit Nashville a couple of weeks ago was stored in one of our spaces. So a little bit of everything.
So how's it going with everything going on with COVID?
Yeah. So we're a 2-sided marketplace. Given social distancing, given we have a physical exchange of product, I would say demand is relatively non-existent outside of a couple core business verticals. And so with that in mind, kind of gearing up to our high season, which is typically the warmer months starting in March, we've acknowledged that, and we've kind of pivoted our strategy a little bit to supply side onboarding. And I think the typical American out there, in light of this looming recession, is very aware of kind of where they're earning their money. With all the layoffs, people no longer have income coming in, and so our onboarding costs on the supply side have gone through the floor. So they're pretty much, we're talking pennies now to get hosts on board with some online advertising. making $2,000, $3,000 a year off your garage and parking in the driveway or on the street suddenly becomes a lot more appealing in
For
these
sure.
kinds of times. And so you reflect back on Airbnb and kind of their origin story, and they came out of the Great Recession.
Yeah.
So we feel like we're well positioned now to kind of capitalize on the unfortunate circumstances kind of swirling around the country right now.
Gotcha. What about from like an internal standpoint? How is it communicating and operating kind of distributed? Because you're based in Nashville, correct? And then
Yeah, we've got an interesting backstory. So there are competitors in our space with a very different business model who have devoted a lot of paid resources to acquisition in certain target markets for tech startups, places like New York and San Francisco. And we thought, given what we're doing, given the mission of trying to save people money and make them money, that we should be thinking about other markets. And that led us in a roundabout way to ending up in Nashville. And so we're HQ'd in Nashville, but the team is dispersed, as you mentioned. We've got one team member that got caught in Mexico City, so she's down there right now.
Okay.
Maybe or maybe not had COVID, but has since recovered. But yeah, we're chugging along. I think we're part of this community called Stache, which is akin to Bunker Labs, but it's Stanford centric. And so there's 400 or 500 companies there, and there's a lot of banter that's active on the CEO email thread. And so companies like Lime Bikes, if you're familiar with them,
yeah, for sure.
Branch Metrics. So a couple, massive companies are part of this thing, and the founders are finding a much greater tolerance on the part of investors to put up with distributed teams, and we seem to feel as a community that that's going to be much more commonplace going forward. And I think that's the case for many industries. Employers will become more tolerant of that kind of behavior.
Interesting. So what advice would you give to an entrepreneur right now if they were struggling a little bit through this?
Yeah, I think a lot of what's going on right now is largely dependent on what your business does. I think certain businesses who base their revenue generation off providing services for other startups are going to have a hard time, and they might want to reevaluate their business model entirely and what they're trying to do. This may be the kind of circumstance that warrants a pivot. I'm predicting we're going to see a bit of a recession here for 12, 18 months potentially. And so I'm planning for that. So for our business as a two-sided marketplace, we actually think this benefits us significantly. We're going to see a downturn in bookings in renters in the short term, but I think coming out of this in terms of the social distancing element, we're still going to have an underlying hard time financially with all the layoffs. People are going to be much more cognizant of where their money's going and be inclined to save money. And I think that's a massive opportunity for us. And the supply side is kind of a no-brainer in terms of just monetizing vacant space. And then there are businesses that are thriving through all this, on-demand players, service-oriented, things like that. So in our case, probably what applies to most people is there's probably pros and cons with what's going on as it relates to your business model, and really evaluate what you're doing and try to see the opportunities that you can double down on in this time. And so for us, that's supply side expansion.
Cool. So in your case, it's like, maybe the present isn't perfect right now, but by planning for the future and kind of extrapolating things out, you can see, there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, certainly. I think there's massive opportunity at the end of the tunnel for us. And so we want to be well positioned to capitalize on that.
Cool. Awesome. Last question. What, are you reading anything these days? Do you have any resources that you think are valuable for some entrepreneurs that are finding themselves a little extra time these days?
Yeah, I mean, for anyone out there that's thinking about fundraising, there's a newsletter put out by a guy named James Currier from the NFX Guild. He sent out a survey to all the VCs and to hundreds of founders. He's got a product called next time I see him, he's going to shoot me now. I can't think of what his product's called, but it's a social network for VCs and founders to kind of be a part of, invite only, but it's pretty expansive at this point. Anybody wants an invite, send me an email, mike@stache.com, and I'll get you one. But he sent out a survey in terms of assessing sentiment on the part of investors. And what was interesting is a third of them are staying the course. A lot of them are panicked, and I think that's what's catching headlines right now. There are massive layoffs with certain companies. And I think if you dig deeper into those details, you'll see there are certain funds behind some of them. And some of this is business model based. Some of this is based on who's backing them and how bearish they are on all this. But it's not hopeless, but the climate's changed.
Yeah.
So you can see founders are expecting slightly lower valuations, business models that were predicated on massive amounts of advertising spend are struggling. Something just came out today from Masayoshi-san running SoftBank, and he said he expects 15 of their portfolio companies to go bankrupt. So I think we're going to see an interest in different kinds of business models going forward, at least in kind of the immediate term. And so if you have an asset-light business, I think it's a great time to be operating, and you shouldn't be overly concerned. Be aware of the climate, but there are opportunities to be had, and I think certain investors recognize that.
Yeah, cool. I appreciate it. Well, Mike, stay safe out there, and I really appreciate you coming on and offering some insights for this community.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, and hope everybody stays safe out there.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.